page 128, the very flared sleeve. So we can see the diagram here. There's a few diagrams on this page. We have the flat drawing there, 5, 6 and 7. So there's actually 3 sleeves being demonstrated. We're doing the 1-7, the one in the middle. So 5 is a short sleeve, and you can see the diagrams there. She shortened it and cut in, and 6 is here, the diagram, and then the adaptation, and 7 is here, and coming down to here is the adaptation. There's very few instructions here because it's there isn't much to say. There's more to do, I suppose, and to learn the technique. So this is about flaring. So when you have something like the block here, which I've traced off, and you want it to go wider at the bottom, that's what you call flare. So if a flared skirt would be the very same thing. We do the same thing, okay? And what we're going to do is, like she says, if you read down the very flared sleeve, all she has is one line. The sleeve is shown with more flare inserted between the sections. So basically the instructions are on 6 for the slightly flared sleeve, and we just put a little bit more flare in. So we read them. All she says is trace your sleeve to the length required. So we trace our sleeve block, and as we know, or as review, one of the first things that we can do is decide our length. In this case, we're going to shorten the sleeve. We can shorten it, say, to the elbow line, which is handy because it's already on the block. All right, and then the next thing she says is draw 5 vertical lines to divide the sleeve into 6 sections. So do you see there? That's this diagram here. So you draw lines down, okay, so that you get 6 sections. Because this and this aren't exactly even, I go and I take my front and I divide it into 3, and my back and divide it into 3. All right, once you do that, we will have a second construction on this one. We're going to trace this. The first construction is going to look just like that. All it is going to be, well, ours is going to be longer, but you're going to draw these lines down to here. And then our second construction is going to be, we're going to put a new piece of paper over. We're going to trace those lines, and can you see, can you visualize it? Then we're going to cut up those lines and spread them out, open them out at the bottom. This example is open just a little bit for a sleeve that looks like that, so a little flare. This one is spread a lot, so for a sleeve that's more flared. So it's a simple enough technique, flaring, you know? You divide the sections up and you cut and spread. So that term cut and spread, you'll hear it all the time. You cut and you spread your pattern out as much as you want, you know, whether that's on a sleeve, a collar, a skirt, a blouse, a cuff, any section. If you want it to be flared, you, generally speaking, a lot of the time you're going to cut and spread it out. And how much do you spread? That's designer's choice. How much flare do you want? Okay, you spread it. The more you spread it, the more flare it has. So one thing to know about flare is that she doesn't give you the theory. The reason she divides this evenly is because you want the flare to be even, don't you? So we don't want just like one part of the sleeve to have a lunge of flare and the rest is kind of straight. That's why we put and divide it up evenly. So that is one concept that is important. So if you have a trouser you want to flare, a skirt you want to flare, you want to divide your block evenly, or as evenly as you can, okay? The skirt block, for example, goes up and then it goes in. So it can't be evenly on the waist and on the hip, but you just choose one. You know, it just needs to be that concept. It doesn't need to be millimeter specific, but it needs to be adhered to. It needs to be thought through, and you need to look and go, this needs to be even. First step is we're going to shorten the block. So we're going to, number 1, as we know, is our length. So I'm going to say that my length is the, to the elbow line, right? Next I'm going to divide it. She says 6 sections. Like I said, these are slightly different. If you take the full measurement and you divide it by 6, what will happen is you'll get a line right next to this line, and that's really annoying. It's like confuses everybody. And so I tend to just do 3 here and 3 here. So if I measure and just find what my measurement is, 5.3, you're right, okay. So,
They're even on both sides.
what's that, sorry?
My back and front are even.
Yeah, well then you can do it, exactly. So all these are a little bit, you know, it's just that a lot of the sleeves won't be even, you know. So if it is even, that's great. If it's not, yeah. So I'm going to measure this one, you see, yeah, mine aren't actually even too, so. But definitely some sleeve blocks aren't. Okay, so then I'm going to square up. So again, remembering your squaring, you know, you need to make this 90-degree angle along this line and be very careful squaring up. Otherwise, you can measure out again. As you know, I'm in favor of measuring. I prefer it. I find my squaring is often a little bit out. So I've measured my 5.3 again. I find that easier. Okay, but you might like to practice your squaring. It's good to get all these techniques down. And again, hopefully we're getting used to our dividing as well, because sometimes people think pattern drafting is really mathematical, but it can be intimidating because there's a few mathematical things, but really, you know, the dividing is the main thing. And so if you get that down, if she says divide into 6 or into 5, and that you just divide by 6 or 5 or whatever she says, that's the main thing you come across aside from terms. So these are all cutting lines. So I'm going to put little scissors on them. So this is construction 1, looks like this. Now I'm going to put my paper down on top, trace this whole thing just to the elbow, and just all these cutting lines, and I'm going to cut it all the way out, then cut all the way up to, but not through that point. So I'm going to leave a hinge, a small hinge, and then I'm going to spread. So that bit is the bit that's a little tricky to do. So the first step really on the next layer on our construction step 2 is going to be drawing a line down. So we're essentially creating our straight of grain for our next step. So our pattern is like this, and we're going to open it out. So in this case, this is the straight of grain line, so I've actually kind of cut it. I've cut my straight of grain line. Whenever you cut on your straight of grain line, I need to open up equally on each side, and then the center of the bit that I opened up is essentially the straight of grain, do you know? So I find it easy to start in the center and flare out generally. Or on skirts and things, I start at the center front and I flare that way. It's common at the beginning when you're flaring that you maybe don't leave enough paper and you end up kind of, not realizing how big it's going to be and all that kind of stuff. So don't worry about that. That is par for the course. As in, what I mean by that is normal. So sometimes people get a little anxious and upset when they make a mistake. So just with the patterns, you're only learning. You're going to run off the page often. You just have to stick more paper on. You're going to cut the wrong thing. You just have to do it again. It's just normal. So, so what I'm going to do is, she has it there that you open out sections, and she has a little amount there given, 5 to 10 centimeters for our very flare. So I'm going to go ahead and open it out that maximum of 10 in full scale. So that will be 5 for you guys in half scale. So what I'm going to do is measure. So if I'm opening 10, I've come out 5 each side. So the full thing there is 10. That's full scale. 5 and a half scale. Okay, so you'd be coming out 2.5 on each side to get your 5. Now I'm going to show you this technique with the gluing again. So with your gluing, with your Pritt stick, you just want to put like a line down the center and line down the center of the two there. You don't need to be, you know, putting piles of glue on and all the way up and spending ages. So I'm going to place the top. Now this is a little funny to demo because everything falls in the way. Okay, so the center at the top there, I'm putting right on the line, and then I am opening this out, the distance there of the 10. Now, this is an important concept. If you open out, and for some reason your paper is not flat, there's a problem. It means it's not flat pattern cutting. We are flat pattern cutting. So you have to be sure that it's flat. It most likely means you have not cut enough at the top. Or you're pulling something out. It can be the other things on the side making it go like that. But you need to cut all the way so that it's literally just a hinge. And then you can come from the top and place down. So if you're noticing that your patterns are raising sometimes when you are spreading, you have not cut far enough. That is actually literally like a thread or a millimeter, and if it separates, it's no problem. You just stick it next to each other, but it's helpful if it sticks together. But you really are cutting it to a very fine distance. Yeah. Okay, and so that's that one spread. Now I'm going to go 10, and notice it's going to curve up, so you know, avoid putting 10 straight out because it's never going to reach that point. So you can kind of see you need to kind of measure at a slight angle, and I'm going to put in my 10 mark, and then I'm going to fold this back and do my line of glue, and then I'm going to line it up with that mark. Okay, yours will be a bit easier because gravity is not working with me here while it's up on the board, so it's easier when you're on the table and spreading it. Okay, then I'm going to go 10 again and glue that, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side. There you go, that is cut and spread. There's 10 centimeters full scale between each of these. So this in a way is 5 and 5, so just be careful about that one because there's a line down it, so sometimes people end up with a much bigger. So be sure each space is even. The last thing you're going to do is make a nice smooth line. I've kind of drawn arrows right there, which isn't great, but you're going to try and smooth this line out into a nice smooth hemline, and then your trace off will be, we'll put the paper down, we'll trace around just the outer edge, so we'll have a nice smooth line here. We will have to maybe smooth off some of these points. They might be a bit sort of angular, so we might just have to add a tiny bit there to make it smoother. We do keep our notches, they're important. But we don't draw in, when we do our final trace off, we don't draw in all these lines. The person that we're handing it to is going to be sewing this. You can look at the picture, there's no seams, there's nothing going on in that sleeve. It's only a flared sleeve. So they don't need to know how we got to this point. We just give them the outside outline of the sleeve, which is now a flared sleeve with its notches, seam allowance and all that, and labeling. Okay, so that is construction step 2.